Hamilton wrote, The Other 51.
Rion Amilcar Scott, welcome to The Other 51. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So we were just talking before I hit record here. We started talking a little bit about Hamilton, and you mentioned that you just introduced it to your students at Bowie State yesterday.
Yes, I did. Incredible. I don't know how we got on it. The discussion, we started talking about the text, and then I started talking about American history, and then next thing I know, I was playing them the title cut.
Nice. So what class? I know you teach English. So what class was this?
This was English 101.
So how do you? So Hamilton in an American history musical in English 101. I love it. So how did that? So like, what were you? When you're? I know you're talking kind of the American history part, but when you're bringing it up in an English class, what are some of the things that you're pointing out to them?
Well, I was talking about the context. I wanted to talk about the context of the American Revolution inspiring the French Revolution, inspiring the Haitian Revolution. So I had to start talking about the American Revolution and that the ideas that came from the American Revolution were created and written by these people who are now characters. And it was a long aside, actually.
Right. So how did you come about Hamilton on your own, not as a class example, but just as something you listened to? How'd you get introduced to it?
I just had heard about it, people talking about it just out in the world. And anything that's overhyped, I just kind of ignore for a while. It took me a very long time to get into Kendrick Lamar. It took me a very long time to get into Hamilton. I think both of them I got into them a year after they were introduced because I was just like, if this overhyped, it can't be that good. And I was wrong on both counts. I had Tidal. I got that free Tidal subscription to watch the Beyonce thing, which to me actually was overhyped. Lemonade. Okay. And I started listening to it on, I think it was July 4th, just thematically, because it thematically went, and it didn't, it was hard for me to get into. It was, the whole narrative was, and I knew there was something there, so I figured I would get back into it and listen to it again. And then I started listening to it again, and I noticed my son was into it. He's 5 at the time, and he knew all the lyrics. Okay. So I was like, I have to get into it now. I kept playing it. I have to get into it now. So he's singing it. He knows all the lyrics, and it just became this thing that we bond over. We act it out. And he knows all the lyrics. He has his little CD player that he plays it in, and it's a lot of fun.
Is there anything better? Because my daughter is 6 now, and she's been listening to it for as long as we have. Is there anything better than a little kid saying it, and I'm the damn fool that shot him?
Yeah, exactly.
So why was it, just out of curiosity, because I find this interesting, so why was it a little hard for you to get into it? Was it kind of the hype around it? Was it something about the actual work that took you a while to warm up to?
Yeah, I think it was the narrative. I think it was hard to figure out exactly what was going on in the narrative. I remember being in high school and learning about Hamilton and Burr, and my mind rejected it. It just made no sense to me that the vice president had shot the Treasury Secretary. I remember that very specifically, being in 9th grade or so, and it's like, that doesn't make any sense. So, I think there was that to it too.
So from someone who I know is very into hip hop, very into that music scene, and certainly much more than somebody like me is, kind of musically, from that perspective, what impresses you about the music of Hamilton and kind of the writing of Hamilton from that perspective?
I mean, just lyrically, it's just incredibly intricate. I would love to know how he sat down and wrote it with all these different voices. It's on a and you can actually, I can actually hear the influences. Hercules Mulligan is almost like a pastiche of Busta Rhymes. You can hear Eminem. You could hear, going all the way back to Chuck D. in it, and I think the lyrical structure is just incredible. The motifs that keep returning. It never stops being impressive.
And we have the Hamilton, the big like book of with the entire script and the annotations on it. And you mentioned Kendrick Lamar, and there's actually one spot in Act 2, I believe it's when Jefferson is rapping in "It Must Be Nice," and there's Washington ain't gonna listen to diffident dissidents. This is the difference. And the annotation from Lin-Manuel is like, this is specifically, it's not an homage, but that's a Kendrick Lamar move right there.
Yeah. And I just the intricateness of it is kind of mind-boggling.
That's one of those things I think when you realize, like, the degree, when you sit down and think about it, the degree of difficulty of this is just seemingly off the charts, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it took him what, 6 years and more to write it.
Right. It was like 2 years to write 2 songs or something like that, which is...
Yeah, it's not surprising. Oh, it's not only the writing of it though. I think it's also the rapping, the flows, the different flows that he's able to call upon. It's pretty incredible. Yeah, I try to do what's his name, Lafayette, mm-hmm. Lafayette's verses. And it's just technically impossible if you're not a rapper.
My wife and I have managed to pull that off, but it took a lot of practice to try to get. And we're a terrible karaoke version of that, so that's not even the
exactly.
So this is not only a Hamilton Love Fest. This is a Press and Sun-Bulletin reunion. Because we were both reporters.
Yay.
We were both reporters at the Press Sun-Bulletin in Binghamton, both kind of covering the same thing. You were covering higher ed and the Binghamton University on the news side, and I was covering it on the sports side. How long were you there?
And it overlapped a lot.
Yeah, we did overlap a lot, actually. So how long were you at the Press?
3 years exactly.
Okay.
I think I left on my 3-year anniversary.
Okay. And kind of, your journalistic career, I mean, can you walk us through that a little bit? Like, where did you, before you got to Binghamton, and what you did at Binghamton, and then did you go right back to school after Binghamton, or did you go to another paper? I can't remember.
I did. I went right back to school.
Okay.
So I came out of undergrad at Howard University. I studied journalism. Mm-hmm. Just because I love writing, love putting ideas together, and there was a paper at Howard that covered not the campus but the community, and I love that aspect of actually getting out into the city and covering that. So that was I think that was a pretty good training ground for my short-lived career.
And so why did you? So you want to be a journalist? You're a journalism major. Worked for 3 years in Binghamton as a news reporter. Why? What made you do the career switch?
I think I just wasn't really satisfied with what I was doing. I was learning a lot, and a lot of great people who being in a small town paper, to get their dues as for the knowledge that they have of journalism. And working with those people was great. But I think I was, I started being more interested in actually actually in literature. And so it's what when I went home, that's what I was generally doing, writing poetry, which I've retired from now, but writing poetry and one thing I had to contend with was journalism is more about information, relationships than about language and the language aspect is there, but I wanted to be to sort of dive more into making my own stories.
Okay. And is that something you were always interested in before, even when you were a journalist, kind of that the nonfiction, the literature, the kind of language aspect of it? Yeah.
I was always writing. I was writing stories, and I was able to bring a little bit of some of that into my work at the paper.
Okay, how so?
There was times when I was able to write features, at times that was welcome, by my editors.
So kind of going the reverse a little bit, now that you've been out of the journalism game for a while, how much do you look back on? Can you see, if at all, your daily journalism background experience influencing the way you write and think now?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll always be a journalist. I always have that journalistic mindset, the questioning mindset. I appreciate that way of looking at the world. Journalists have this horrible reputation for being unethical, which is, journalists are some of the most ethical people that you will ever meet in your life. And of course, human, they make these mistakes, but I take that with me. And I always have a lot of honor and respect for journalism because of the people that I met and the people that I worked with.
So tell us a little bit about your nonfiction writing and the work you do. I know you last year published your collection of short stories. Kind of tell us a little bit about, I don't know, your style of writing or kind of like the general themes. So if you were to describe yourself as a writer right now, how would you do that?
Yeah, I don't do much nonfiction. I mean, I do when I have to. And when I do,
okay.
And I try to, I try to make it, the best. I always make the joke that when I do, I'm going from James Baldwin's head. When I'm writing essays. I describe myself primarily a fiction writer.
Okay.
So, and I write about a fictional town that I created called Cross River, Maryland. Which was founded after a slave revolt in 1807. So that's that's how I describe myself as a chronicler of Cross River. Sometimes I imagine myself a journalist. I'm a journalist covering Cross River.
By the way, I totally meant to say fiction. I don't know why I said nonfiction, but I totally meant fiction, so I apologize for that. So how did you? So yeah, you created this town. Where did that idea come from? Where did that idea start, and how did you? And then, kind of second part to it, but how do you what's the process for creating this fictional town that you set your stories in?
Well, back when I was at Howard, I wrote a short story. It was called The Legend of Old Cigar, and it was about a slave revolt. And it was a pretty bad short story, and I knew it was pretty bad when I was writing it, but I needed to finish.
Okay.
And I needed, for my own self, to call myself a writer. I hadn't been finishing stories. I said I need to finish, and I finished it. And it was I don't know if I ever looked back at it, but when I got to grad school, I wanted to have a place that I could call home, and a place that I could go back to, and keep building stories from. So I thought back to that story about the slave revolt, and I decided to set everything there, and it's like it's a lot of fun because it's like I have my like a toy chest, and I keep going back to it and pulling out toys that I've used before, and then I discover, hey, look, there's a new toy in the corner, and it provides great this great this great structure for my work.
That's got to be fun when you kind of that process of discovery, even though it's something you've created. That idea of, I love that idea of finding something that you didn't realize was there in this town that you created, and that just sounds like a lot of fun as a writer to kind of have that world, this own little world that's yours, and you can kind of explore it in a way. Does it feel like, I don't know if this is a good question or not, but does it feel like it's it's an actual place, like it's a living town that you're constantly finding stuff in?
Yeah, somewhat. I have to remind myself that I made it up, but yeah, I do. Actually, I always wonder, what's going on in Cross River now. I know intellectually, I hate when writers, pretend as if the characters are writing the story, but I understand why they do, because it feels that way sometimes. It feels like it's
Why do you? So that's curious because that's the writer. One of the writer tips, tools, tricks you often hear that like you create the world, you create the characters, and you kind of let the characters tell their own story. Why do you hate that idea?
'Cause it feels disingenuous.
Okay.
And a lot of times when I'm sitting down and writing, it's not going well, and it doesn't feel like it's a living world. But at times it does. But and I have to remind myself that it's just a feeling. It's just something that I'm it's just something that I've it's just something that's sort of swirling around in my head. I made up this play. It doesn't exist independently. It only exists independently of me when readers pick it up and they create it in their minds themselves as well.
Right. So I know you've written a lot of, you have this collection of short stories. What's structuring a short story, I don't know, versus the idea of structuring a full novel or a book? So let's start there. Why short stories? Why is that kind of the form that you seem drawn to and are writing a lot?
I just like it's like the challenge of creating something very small, in a very small space. And you can if you read somebody like Edward P. Jones, he creates these entire worlds in 20, 30 pages. I love novels, but they're different forms. Short stories, so are very focus oriented on the end. Novels are focused on creating intricate structures and knocking down those intricate structures. So they're different. They're different beasts, and being good at one doesn't necessarily mean good at the other. And my failed novels will tell you that.
Why? So short stories, I feel like, kind of get short shrift, for lack of a better phrase. Like the novel is very much, it feels lionized. Like you want to write a novel, we read novels. It doesn't seem like short stories have that kind of widespread acceptance among readers. And I don't know about writers. You can speak to that a little bit from your world. But why is that? Why do you think a lot, to speak in generalities, we love the novel, but the short stories kind of not so widely loved anymore? I know historically they have been, but kind of in contemporary, why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't know if I have a complete answer for you. I mean, I love short stories, so it's kind of, but I think that people like the unity of novels, and nowadays you have short story collections that are that are marketed as novels, that are just novels in other names. So I don't know. I think people don't like starting over again after 15 pages and having to jump into another world after 10, 15 pages again. So I don't know. It's hard to nail it down.
So I'm giving myself a challenge in reading to kind of get back into short stories, or get into short stories. Just coming to me right now. Give me some recommendations. Where should I start if I want to, aside from yours, obviously?
I would read Junot Diaz's collections, Drown and This Is How You Lose Her. I would read Edward Jones's, particularly Lost in the City. But his other one, All on Hagar's Children, has some fabulous, incredible stories in there. I would read Randa Gerard's what's the name of this? Escaping me. I was just reading it. Me, Him, Muhammad Ali. So yeah, and those are just some contemporary things. I would Randa Gerard just came out last year. Laura Vandenberg's first one, I forgot the title of it. I think it's What the World Would Look Like When All the Water Leaves, or something to that effect.
So what's your actual writing process like when you sit down to write a short story?
Yeah, it varies. Usually, a lot of times, if I don't, usually it's two different story ideas coming together. It usually doesn't work out until I have two different ideas, and they'll never be like how they are in my head. They have to be bent and shaped and twisted.
Okay.
I try to I try to write. I try to write at night. I don't know how well that's working nowadays. It's harder to stay awake. Uh, and what I don't usually, like, a lot of people, they come and they have their complete draft, and then they write it over. I'm more along the lines of going back and editing as I go along. A lot of times when I open the file, I go back to the first word, and then go through each sentence. But it changes. There was one story in my book, the last story, I feel like I wrote it almost like word by word.
Oh, wow.
I knew that there were words that needed to be in it, and I would open the file, I would write it, and paradoxically, it took me a shorter amount of time than it would have had I tried a different way. I mean, I did try a different way, and that's why I went to the to that word by word format, because I knew that there was gonna it's written in Trinidadian dialect. And I knew that it's something that I'm very familiar with, but not familiar with writing in it. So I knew I had to take it very slow and be very methodical.
Okay.
With structuring.
So is that what you mean by that word by word style, like a very slow typing process, slow writing process, as opposed to, are you usually more faster and then go back and edit it? Is that the difference?
Yeah, usually it's faster writing in a more unified way. With the word by word, usually I'll open the file, I sort of stare at it, and I would write it in parts, and even just like some days it would just be a word or 2 words or 3 words, and it was it put more emphasis and weight on the words, and it helped me to write something above the level that I was at the time.
And where do you get where do your ideas come from? You said that a lot of times you have 2 different story ideas coming together, and you got to kind of work them and let them dance together. Where do your actual story ideas come from?
Yeah, they come from everywhere. Reading, listening to music, observing things. A lot of times, things that I'm very annoyed about, I'll make fun of them. A lot of times it's thinking back to things that have happened, and a lot of times it's a what if story. What if I didn't have the maturity to handle my life, I turned that into a disaster. What if that mistaken encounter on the street wasn't just a moment where I just walked by, but it turned into a big problem. So that's where a lot of the story ideas have come from. It's various different sources.
Okay, so I know you teach. We're both professors. You teach English. You teach writing. Let's start here. Is there anything that your student writers, you don't talk about your students, but student writers in general, what's your pet peeve? What's one thing or 1 or 2 things they do that just drive you crazy?
Pet peeve, like twist endings. The way the twist just comes out of nowhere. I think a lot of younger writers, and it's gonna sound strange coming from me, but a lot of younger writers, tend to think that grammar is not it's something separate, and that they can turn into something that is not really readable. And there's so much that you can do with both following and making the rules of grammar to help create the mood in your work. And if you're neglecting that, you're neglecting a huge portion of neglecting a huge tool in your toolbox.
My wife, the copy editor, will love hearing that, by the way, using grammar to your advantage. For me, so I know we teach very different writings. I teach more journalism writing, but I think for me, one of my pet peeves is when young writers try too hard or try to explain too much in the story. Like there will be, and you'll remember this from your journalistic days, there'll be like the quote, but then they will write a big long paragraph setting up the quote that's not needed. Mm-hmm. and I that's a very common young writer thing, but I always want to tell them, you can be confident in your writing, and you don't have to spell everything out for me as a reader. You can kind of have that confidence to let your work and let your writing, reporting and writing kind of carry the day. You don't have to explain everything to me. You don't have to kind of try to show off your writing a little bit. There's the stupid cliche of getting out of the way of the story, but I think that's a really important thing for writers. Is that something that you find in fiction writing as well? The idea of kind of getting out of the way and just letting the story be there?
Definitely. I think there's a lot of times when students want to tell you exactly what just happened when it's pretty obvious what just happened. I think that cutting down on editorializing can bring the story alive. Just let the characters have a life on the page and do the work. And I think that what you're saying is being confident in yourself, and yeah, I agree with that. But I think it's also about being confident in the readers, right? And trusting the reader's intelligence.
Right. Absolutely. So I know that's one that kind of bleeds into my next question. That's you can kind of build off of that or go somewhere else. But when you're dealing with students or talking to students, what's maybe one or two little things that somebody can do to make their writing 10% better now? Like what's one one little tip that can make your writing better?
Well, to be specific, specificity.
Okay.
Being specific, will paint the picture for the reader. And it's tricky because you don't want to be overly specific, to where you're like a little fascist on the page.
What's the best thing you've read recently?
Best thing I've read recently. I'm reading this book by writer Desiree Cooper called Know the Mother.
Okay.
Very surprising, very very short stories. Very surprising turns in the sentences. I was reading that last night, and I was I didn't really want to stop, but I had to stop. But I'm looking forward to getting back into it today. About 40 something pages in, and I think it's an incredible book.
Okay. What kind of books does your boy like to read? Or have read to him? Where is he on the reading scale right now? Is he starting to read?
Yeah, he's doing great. He's ahead. We've been reading to him since he was in the womb, literally, and and he's constantly every night before bed. We have to pry the books from his hands. He reads everything. He reads everything. He's been reading. He heard some show called Yokai Watch. That's pretty much all he talks about. There's a book fair at school. He made sure to get his yokai book. But yeah, he's about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ahead of the reading schedule. So
that's awesome. Yeah,
very happy with it.
My girl's like that too, and that's been probably like the most. It's gonna sound such a dad thing to say, but it's the most magical thing I think I've seen her. Skill I've seen her pick up. Once you start, we've been reading to her same thing since she was in the womb, and every night bedtime stories is like the thing in our house. But like to see her actually start to read it on her own, and once she started putting those words together, like it sounds so corny, but it was so magical to kind of see her being able to do this herself.
It's not
and it's go ahead.
With my son, it was kind of like 1 week he wasn't reading, and he was sort of he was really into us reading to him, and the next week it's just like all of a sudden he was reading book after book on his own. What was really funny one time was that he has a little tablet. He Googled me, and he wakes me up one morning by reading one of my essays.
Oh,
no. Of course he wasn't reading it fluidly, but he actually read the entire thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think he was drawn to it because it was an essay on comic books and superheroes, and that's another thing that he's really into. And there was a illustration of a superhero looking type guy, so I think he was drawn to it. But yeah, he actually read it. I don't know how how well he comprehended it, but he actually read the entire thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, my daughter's reading Drama, which is it's kind of like a kind of comic book graphic novel. It's meant for like preteens, like 10-year-olds, and so she, luckily she misses like half of the stuff that she probably is too young to see. But to watch her reading that, and like she loves reading Lumberjanes, and that's one of her favorite comics, and that's just awesome to see her see them get into that, and see her get into getting their own taste, right? Kind of figuring out what they like on their own, independent of what you read to them.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun.
So, all right, Rion, if people want to read your stuff or find out more about you or read about your superheroes essay, where can they find some of your stuff?
To find me at rion.amilcar.scott. I'm sorry, I'm doing it wrong. Just my name, Rion Amilcar Scott .com. www.rionamilcarscott.com.
Okay.
Also on Twitter, at Rion Amilcar Scott. And yeah, other than that, Amazon, IndieBound, Insurrections.
Okay. All right, we'll make sure a link to that is in show notes so people can check it out. And thanks a lot for joining me today. This was a lot of fun catching up.
All right, great talking to you.